This video will show you how to use the Nanalysis NMR machine. First, you'll need to prepare your sample. NMR tubes look like very thin test tubes. They're made of very uniform glass and they're expensive, so please be careful with them. You're going to need to insert a pipette into the tube in order to add sample and solvent. But just be careful that you don't exert pressure on the top lip of the test tube when you do that. The top of the tube tends to crack with a little bit of pressure. Also, don't leave these on the bench top where they could roll off. A good place to rest an NMR tube that you're not using is in a 250 Erlenmeyer flask. Don't drop it in there. That could crack the bottom of the tube. Just gently rest it on the bottom. We are going to prepare a very concentrated sample because our instrument is not as sensitive as a research-grade instrument. To prepare a sample of a liquid substance, pipette about 1 centimeter of that liquid into the bottom of the tube. I would pipette a little bit at a time. You'll notice because of the thinness of the tube, there's a lag time between adding it and having it all run to the bottom. Once you have about 1 centimeter of the liquid sample substance, you're going to pipette another 2 to 3 centimeters of deuterated chloroform on top of that. The exact amounts of these two liquids are not critical, but I would prefer that you don't waste the deuterated chloroform because that is more expensive. Cap the tube, then turn it upside down 2 to 3 times to mix the sample and solvent. We are not using solid samples this year, so this slide is just a placeholder. The machine works best when the samples are at a particular temperature. So once you're finished preparing your sample, put that sample into one of the slots in the sample warmer next to the machine. Be sure that you remember which slot you put your sample in because other groups may be warming their samples at the same time. Remove the reference from the machine and put it in the sample warmer. Then take your sample and gently guide it into the machine. Softly press the cap of your sample to make sure that it is all the way down in the machine. To take your NMR spectrum, press go, then wait. The machine is set to take 16 scans. If the sample is not very concentrated, that can be increased. 16 scans takes about 1 to 2 minutes. Once you have your spectrum, you are going to want to flatten the baseline. To do that, press Process, then Phase. Bars will appear. You can slide them until the baseline looks flat. Next, you may want to expand just the area that contains your peaks. To do this, press View, Zoom With, and then touch on either side of the baseline where your peaks are. To integrate your peaks, press Analyze and then Integrate. It will auto-integrate based on where it thinks the peaks begin and end. If this doesn't look right, you can also manually choose where the peaks begin and end by clicking the manual toggle. We did that here because the peaks were overlapping and the instrument had a tough time figuring out where one began and ended. If you have an idea that one of the peaks is, say, a methyl or one of the peaks is a CH2, you can make the integrations easier to analyze by setting that as a reference. So for instance, here, the leftmost peak we're pretty sure was a CH2. So we set the reference equal to 2, and then all the other integration values were scaled. To print your spectrum, press the print icon on the screen. Once you're sure that the spectrum has printed and has printed correctly, press Done. You do not need to save the spectrum. Finally, remove your sample from the machine and replace it either with the reference or have the next group put in their sample. You're going to pour out your sample into the designated test tube and then rinse the tube 3 times with acetone. The acetone will go into the acetone waste. Do not put the squeeze bottle tip directly into the NMR tube. That is a good way to snap off the top of the test tube.